Yeah, so like like as you get jobs and stuff and you start like working on projects and stuff, I think it goes from like you had that mindset of trying to get into the industry and like that was the goal, right? So like once you get it, like the goalposts sort of just like disappear, and if you didn't move them preemptively, like okay, I got this job. Okay, now I'm gonna try to, like let's say if you're working in video games or something, like okay, I work at this indie company now. Now my goal is to get to like Bungie or, id or insert big game company, right? Like have stepping stones and stuff. For me, it sort of just like, okay, I got a job working in film, and I was just like, okay, what now? Like, I didn't, think of like what was the next step. Um, so there was like a period there where I was like, sort of like, contracts would end. I was sort of like job hopping, and like going from like 3 month contract to 3 month contract of like, I was racking up all these credits and working on these like Marvel projects and like Game of Thrones, all these big things. But I sort of felt lost at the same time, like both of like where I was going like with my own art, and then also career wise. So like over time, I sort of like reestablished myself and sort of grounded, uh, like where I wanted to go and like what my next goals were pretty much. But it took a bit. So like if like for people that are like about to get in or like they're like getting big jobs and stuff now, I'd probably be like be aware of that, because you can end up wasting a bit of time, which is what I think I did. Where you could have been uh, another year ahead of yourself or something. Um,
In episode 10 of the Learn Squared podcast, we're delighted to welcome concept artist David Tilton. David was one of our first round of students when Learn Squared launched and has since gone on to work on projects such as Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, and X-Men Dark Phoenix, as well as his own IP. In this episode, you'll discover what got David into concept art as a profession and how close he was to spending $300K on his art education. We also find out how David's approach to his art has changed over time, how the development of tools are affecting the way we work, and how he became friends with a certain Learn Squared instructor through playing StarCraft. Buckle up and let's go. All right, cool.
yeah, no.
Well, let's give the official intro. In fact, actually, obviously, you go by David Tilton. Do you prefer to be called Dave, or do you have another kind of nickname?
Uh, Either works, like David or
Okay,
Dave.
cool.
I go by like anything, yeah, pretty
Anything.
much. Yeah,
As long as it's polite,
no,
anything will do.
yeah, no, legit. It's
Cool,
just
cool. Well, welcome, David. Me personally, I've been aware of your work for quite a while. Obviously, the guys at Learn Squared have as well, as you well know. Um, before I started working at Learn Squared, obviously I started off as a student, just trying to get in, and I believe the first courses I took are the same one. Well, I saw you on there because you did the mentorships and the archives. It was
oh
the
yeah.
Java courses.
Oh no,
So
they're still up.
and like for me, obviously going through, I've got my own story of why I took the courses. I just wanted to scam
Yeah.
some employers thinking that I did some good work. My idea with taking a course was to make at least a couple of cool pieces that look great, and then
Yeah.
hopefully fill in the blanks afterwards. But then that took a whole different path, a much more awesome path.
Mhm.
But then I just wanted to take the course, and obviously they did the archives, which was like is it the bonus content or journey? Basically, when they did the mentorships and
Yeah.
show not just jammers and the apprentice, but obviously the mentorship students as well. Did you do mentorships on both? I believe, is that right?
No, just the first one. So just the intro to the 3D
Three. That's
concept.
it. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one. And then after that, I just took I think you guys have different tiers now, but
Mm.
like it used to be like the $200 tier or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
go from 100, 200, and then
Mm-hmm.
the mentorships. So for his it was the painting and like 2D concepts were
Yeah.
sort of stuff. So I just did the narrative concept art. There we go. I just did the second tier and just went at it, and
Mm.
I was already on like a friendly basis with him, so I'd sort of
Yep,
just
yep.
message. I'd be like, "Hey, Jama, what did you mean by this?"
Oh, that's cool.
Um, so that helped fill in the blanks. And then like that allowed me to make a bunch of you know decent enough work to get jobs and uh, you know uh, break down doors and get into the
Mm.
industry and all that good stuff.
And like, what was your? I guess status is the wrong word to use, but what was your like situation or your mindset prior to taking the Lens Grade course? Like, where were you at in your journey as an artist? Like, were you looking to be a professional at that time? Was it something that you thought, hey, let's check this out, or was it part of a longer strategy? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah. So like ever since I was young, like probably like 13, I was
Hmm.
like, oh, I want to like I figured out what concept art was through
Mm.
like like Game Informers and like just being like a gaming nerd pretty much
Hmm.
and seeing all that stuff. I was like, oh, okay, that seems like something fun to do, and like I kind of made that my unofficial career path.
Yeah.
And then as I went through high school and all that stuff, it sort of became a more solidified mindset.
Hmm.
And then like I started studying and all this stuff. And then when LearnSquared was coming around, I was already, bothering Jama from his Gumroads and
Ah,
stuff. And,
wicked.
occasionally jumping in a StarCraft 2 game with him or something and picking his mind through that, even though I was horrible at the game.
Oh.
And that kind of went into like, oh, maybe I should take this mentorship. And, at the time I was taking the career path, I guess, way more seriously and,
Hmm.
trying to uh, make industry quality work as best as
Yeah.
I could. And I thought that would be the like quickest path
Right. Right.
compared to um, just kind of like looking at people's stuff and being like, okay,
Mm.
that's the goal, but I have no idea how to get
Sure.
from
Yeah.
A to B sort of thing. Um, so that kind of fast tracked it, which was nice,
Mm.
especially like with the feedback and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think feedback from somebody that's that much your senior, um,
For sure.
both on like a visual side and just like a like the thought process behind everything is invaluable. Um,
And how
so
do
yeah.
you think, like, without the feedback, your work would have been? Like, how you mentioned obviously it is valuable, but like, and it's probably a difficult question to answer because it's hard to quantify these kind of things. But like,
Hmm.
say, because again, from my experience, I ended up doing the apprenticeship with Mache on one of his courses,
Oh,
and
awesome.
similar to yourself, most of the courses when I first took them, there were no mentorships available. So it was just a case of doing the, like you mentioned, I think it was the Learn Squared tier at that time, which is the $200 one with all the
Yeah.
courses and what have you.
Mm.
So I was happy with taking those and just picking up because the content and the skills I was getting. I'm thinking like, this is great. This is really leveling me up. But then when it was that
Yeah.
one-on-one and getting that like insight from someone who's like on that level that you want to aspire to be, seeing things that maybe you didn't see and what have you, that was like, okay, a big game changer for me. And it really changed my workflow going forward. And I look back thinking that if I never had that, I'll probably be at least a few degrees away from where I'm at right now. So yeah, I want to know, like, I'd like to know your insight into that and what your experience was like in terms of the difference between, I guess, the feedback and maybe if you weren't to have that.
Yeah, no, like I think if I wouldn't have had that feedback, I still would have, found a workaround, though I
Mm.
probably wouldn't be, at the same like skill level of where I'd be now, or
Mm.
maybe I wouldn't have had the work I needed to get into the industry at the time,
Mm-hmm.
so it would have been pushed, maybe a year forward or
Yeah.
something, or um, but as far as that, I think it was just something I was dead set on. So like,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
I was gonna make it happen no matter what, sort
Yes.
of thing.
Yes.
But I think like the feedback, you know, being as valuable as it is, and like being able to pick their brains and stuff, and
Yeah.
being able to, like the little tricks that you wouldn't really
Exactly.
get
Yeah.
without that stuff. Like I know like a trick Jama does, like when he's almost close to finishing an image and he's about to like do some last minute paint overs, he'll put like a radio blur on like 1%,
Mm-hmm.
and like have like a mask on it, and like little things like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
just like helps focus your image a bit more,
Mm.
or like helps the readability of it, and just balances it all. Where like if you didn't know these things, or if you didn't experiment in Photoshop or something, it'd be really hard to achieve
Yeah, yeah.
that same level, I think. So like the little things like that, where it's just like, pushing it from that, I guess like, like top level student work to actual professional work,
Yes, yes.
is
And
where I
you
learned a
touched
lot.
upon something cool there, where you mentioned that like you were driven no matter what, you're gonna make it happen. Like, did you, before doing the courses and stuff, were you like where were you at, like academically, or were you studying something? Were you at some kind of college or whatnot, or was it straight like
Yeah, so
what's your learning path been like? Has it been self-taught, like online, I guess, or has it been
yeah,
like
so it's
some kind of
mostly been like
academic as well?
so like I was going to like college for graphic design, and I
Yeah.
actually had like 2 classes left before getting my degree, before I got
Mm-hmm.
my first job, and then I was just like, screw that, bye. And then, and I've been meaning to go back and finish it, but like I'm working at this point, so I'm like,
Yeah, sure.
why, what's the point?
That's the end goal, right? And you got it.
No, exactly, exactly. So that was more my fallback plan, like graphic design. I did learn a lot of stuff as
Mm-hmm.
far as like design theory and all this other
Right,
stuff,
right, right.
and that I still use in my day to day,
Nice.
which is nice. But yeah, no, like I was living in my parents' basement pretty much.
Yeah.
Just graduated high school, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like 17, 18 when the JAMA mentorship
Wow.
happened.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I think I was like young enough to like have some uh I guess leeway, as far as like if I screwed up,
Yeah.
like it wouldn't be the end of the world,
Yeah.
which was I'm thankful for, because I've had friends where it was a bit more difficult to get, for them to get where they wanted to go,
Right.
just because of their circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Though it took my parents a bit of convincing to,
Yeah.
allow them to be like, oh, this is actually like a career, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, um, but yeah, no, like I almost went to art center. That was another
Okay.
thing that, um, for people that don't know, Art Center College of Design, it's in Pasadena,
Mm-hmm.
California, and it's like the premier design school. At least for a lot of people in their minds, it's like Sid Mead, Craig Mullins, you know, I think John Park went there, a
Yeah.
bunch of really big
Yeah. Yeah.
people. And I got in, like
Wow.
I sent off my thing. I got into their entertainment design program. I think they let like 20 people in every
Nice.
term or something. So like I was like, oh shit, I got in. And I was planning on going, and then so I was on a friendly basis with Jama. Like we
Yeah. Yeah.
play StarCraft and all that. So like I had him and my dad. My dad was sitting next to me, and I called up Jama, and I was like, hey, I got to Art Center. Do you think I should go? And then like it was super weird, but like I don't know. Like I think that also saved me
Right.
from like a lot of debt and all this
Oh,
other
for sure.
stuff,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
would have I I think that would have also been a huge hindrance, career wise.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be just like mental health wise, of like, oh no, I have to pay off all this student debt,
True. Yeah. Yeah.
or because I think it would have been like 300,000 or something, like
That's
for all
insane.
4 years. And
That's
I was just like,
insane.
you can buy a house for that.
Dude, you can buy over here, like
Like
you can buy
a
a
big
decent house.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I was just like, okay, and like Jamo was saying, like like in 2 years you'll probably be at the level where you'll be a professional.
Mm-hmm.
So just he just told me to stick it out, and it ended up working out, and that's how I got where I am pretty much, and then like it went from job to job sort of
Yeah.
thing from there.
I think it's like with this industry in particular, because it's like I went to university for a number of years. It was a 4 year course, nowhere near the same kind of debt like art center.
Hmm.
But for different reasons, it didn't just work out, and that was like 10 years ago. Now I graduated,
Yeah.
and the concept art journey only properly started, although it was like up until that point. I think I graduated when I was like 25. Only when I was like 30 when it was like, okay, or 29 maybe, when I kind of got to make it happen. And that's when I
Mhm.
discovered online learning myself as well.
Mhm.
And even from that, doing that, I think it's more because of like you mentioned, the drive and wanting to make it happen, no matter like, whichever way it came, and then getting all this
Yeah.
awesome information and guidance from people that actually do it, not just a case of, like here's how it normally is. It's like this is how we do it day to day, and that really helped me realize that okay, this can be done, and it made me think that like if this was around, say, a few years before I went to university, then that's a path that I would have taken because unless you're doing that's like you're trying to be a doctor or some kind of like scientist or what have you, or a few other professions, this doesn't need like a brick and mortar kind of school to be good at. And you're proof of that. A lot of other artists are proof of that as well. So many are self taught. And it is just a case of like, I guess, mileage and skills and practice and obviously it's having a good flow. Um,
Yeah. Mhm.
but like back to the driven element, like where did that come from? Is that just part of your nature, would you say, or what? Why did you want to do this? Like what was it that said to you that I have to be an artist, I have to be a concept artist?
Well, I don't think I was like amazing at anything else, to be honest. Like art
Mm-hmm.
was that one thing that I was like, like I don't know, like at least in high school, people were like, "Oh, you're like really good and stuff," and I was just like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And then I found the internet and like all the
Yeah.
people on there, and then I was just like, "Oh, I'm dog shit. Okay, this is like,
Yeah.
I'm bottom of the barrel." Yeah,
Yeah.
and then, but with that also like came, that like want to get better
Mm.
and that like sort of like um just like drive to like pursue this
Yeah.
and like over the course, there's ups and downs. Everybody has times where they're
Sure.
like, oh, I want to quit, or
Mm-hmm.
like you just have to step back for a bit or something. And for me, like I had to do like a bit of like like sort of like brainwashing of myself, where it's
Mm.
like 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 that super like read like try hard and like mentality of reading
Yes.
self-help books and like taking everything to heart and
Yeah.
just putting those audiobooks on of like all that stuff, like the compound effect
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all these other books and all that, and it does work, like like for people that want to like, I guess, sort of like artificially create that drive,
Mm-hmm.
like reading those things and watching motivational videos on YouTube, like it does work.
Mm-hmm.
But like after a while, it sort of just got old for me,
Mm.
and I kind of organically just found my my proper flow and groove
Yes.
and
Yes.
just kept going down that. Um, but yeah, that's like pretty much how like I kept going at it,
Mm.
was like using resources like that, at
And
least for
it
the start.
and in hindsight, let's say your younger self came up to you, and you were like at that low point, or maybe like say a negative well, where you were like, okay, this isn't kind of working, or things aren't going the way you wanted to. What would you tell
Hmm.
yourself then?
Like
Would it
just
be
keep
to say
going.
read those books, or would you give different advice now?
Like yeah, I'd probably be the same, to be
Yeah. Yeah.
honest. Just like like just having like something to tell you like it's not hopeless
Mm.
is important. So like my advice would be just like keep going,
Mm.
and like whether it be like some people use music for motivation, or if like there's so many avenues to
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
motivate
Yeah.
yourself, whether it just be like through your own willpower or external sources, but like I think like keeping that going is like
Mm.
like what got me to where I am pretty much, and
And if you
I
don't
think a lot of people
mind,
have similar paths.
like going back to it a little bit, like what brought that on? Would you say for yourself, or what were you going through where you did feel like, I guess,
Oh yeah,
low
so
or
like
negative?
yeah, like I don't know, there's a lot of times where like that would happen,
Mm-hmm.
like like whether it be like jobs would fall through, like
Yes.
I
Yes.
like what was it, like I think when I was like 17. This is like right before the JAMA mentorship.
Yeah.
ILM hit me up. They're
Wow.
like, "Hey, do you want to interview for this concept art position?" I was like, "Oh my god, yeah!" You know,
Sick.
like being a big Star Wars nerd and all this
Yeah,
other
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Um, so I was like, "Yeah, totally, let's do this." And like everything went good. Like I signed the NDA.
Wow.
Uh, um, and like in my mind, because this was my first like big job interview, I was like, "Oh, I've got the job." Uh, but I didn't get the job. So it ended up going to someone local, which they were way better than me,
Mhm.
way more experience and all this other stuff. So I was like, okay, I took that, and then like I used that as like a like something to light my fire sort of thing of like
Yeah, yeah.
keep going, you're closer, you're closer.
Mhm.
But at the initial point when like I got the news, I was like super bummed
A
and all
kick
this
in the
other
gut.
stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was like sort of like fuck, like
But then I
you know
guess like, is that almost like
yeah, it's like a
you look back
double-edged
at it now?
sword, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that like your Neo
uh,
moment where?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like you're fighting Agent Smith.
yeah.
You're getting your ass kicked.
Bullet time
Um,
stopped. You run out of that.
yeah, no, exactly. But then like at a certain point, it just like snaps, and then you
Yeah.
you turn it around, sort of thing. And that's what that was for me.
Mhm.
And then like before that, there was like a earlier point, like back when I was like 15, of trying to like I sent in like art center portfolio sort of thing, like
Yeah.
or sorry, 16.
Yeah.
And that got denied, and then I retried again the next year, got in. I was like, okay, so there's progress.
Mm.
Even though I didn't end up going to the school, I was like, okay, there's uh like at least I have some sort of skill level to where I can get into like the
Yeah.
big university of entertainment design
Mhm.
and like for film stuff and all that. So I was like, okay.
Cool.
And that was another thing. I was like, okay, take the negative and turn into a positive
Mm.
sort of thing.
And
Um,
what was like what did you do differently on the second time round with the art center thing? Because obviously you had that experience first time round and it wasn't successful.
yeah, so
Um.
like the first time around, it was pretty much just like I had an idea of what they wanted, but I sort of winged it.
Mhm.
And then like the second time around, I sort of was like, I'm just gonna get as close to like like the industry level as
Yeah. Yeah.
so I was
Yeah.
looking at like Mache's work and like Jamas and
Yeah.
like Nick Shindro and like those sort of guys,
Mhm.
along with like other older art center portfolios that people had up online. I
Yeah.
was just like, okay, if I can get slightly above where these art center portfolios were, because the ones online are from years prior. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so a bit past that, so closer to the pretty much as close to the professional work as
Mhm.
possible. And then for layout stuff, I used the art center other one, like the older art center portfolios
Ah.
online as like a reference. um and set up like a little playbook of how I'd
Nice.
go about this. And that worked, and I was like, okay, like this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And like I was planning on going, but looking back, I'm kind of happy I
Yeah.
didn't. um, just because you do learn a lot more on the job, I think.
Mm. 100%. I think like even when I was at uni, this was like decade ago. They were even mentioning
Mm,
then, like they were giving their warnings then, saying that the difference between, because I did transport design, so it's like people trying to get
mm,
into the car industry and what have you.
yeah,
They're already giving warnings then, saying that only like a small percentage of you will be like okay enough to go straight into the industry, and even then you still struggle because there's still it was like a gulf in terms of experience and quality and I guess mindset from
mm,
student straight to professional.
yeah.
But like say when you did the courses and you're building up your portfolio, like were you what was your portfolio at that point in time? Like were you hunting for jobs, or was it still like the courses were there to polish it off and then you were going to go attack the industry with your work?
Yeah, so I guess before I started like the courses, it was more of like I thought I was ready for the industry, but I really wasn't. Like looking back, I was like
Yeah.
nowhere near.
I've
So
been there.
I'd be like sending. I'd just be like like sending off emails to random companies and
Yeah.
sort of just like brute forcing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like looking back, like I don't think that works
Right.
unless you have the work that matches up pretty
Sure.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So eventually I did, build up that work quality, and I kept brute forcing it and just
Mhm.
like sending off emails and you know messaging like Shaddy on Facebook and be like, hey, do you, like stuff like that, even though like um like certain things don't line up or whatever.
Yeah.
So eventually you do get that work.
Yeah.
And if I were to do it differently, I'd be less pushy,
Okay.
obviously.
Okay.
Because like at the time I was like still a teenager,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
understanding like certain like social boundaries and all
Right.
this
Right.
other
Right.
stuff of like like, oh, people you know are this isn't their life. Like concept art isn't the
Yes.
entirety of their
Yeah.
life. Like they have other things and stuff. Like realizing that like after the fact sort of thing, because at the time I was just like so dead set, and I was just like, oh, everybody just no lace on this stuff pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
That's uh and like that's sort of what it felt like, as far as like you'd hear like people be like, oh yeah, like I work for 18-hour days, or
Yeah.
crazy stuff like this.
Yeah.
And like now I don't think that is the case for
Mhm.
a lot of people, or maybe it was back in the day, I'm not sure. But yeah, no, like just that's something I'd tell my younger self, would be like, be a more I don't know, I guess thoughtful when you come
Thoughtful.
to
Okay. Yeah.
approaching
Cool.
people. Yeah.
Cool. And how long have you been in the industry now? Would you say, like, as a professional? Do you remember the point where you actually felt like I'm a pro now?
Yeah, I guess like that the first time where I thought that was like I was doing like some short film work
Mm-hmm.
for like some Canadian companies for like film festivals, and I was like, okay, I'm making money now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm technically a professional, but like the point where I was just like, okay, I made it, was I got to work on a few movies. Like one of them was like Doctor Strange, and then like
Nice.
an underworld film, and then
Yeah.
like a few other internal IPs for Luma Pictures. And that
Mm-hmm.
was like the point where I was like, okay, I made it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got my first credit, and
Yes.
that's sort of like me kickstarting my professional career.
Mm-hmm.
At least in like the more AAA and like
Yeah.
bigger projects and all this stuff.
And did that
So
change your mindset much in terms of, like, because I guess before you really spoke about how it was about getting into the industry, building that portfolio. You mentioned obviously with things like Art Center and even the ILM situation where, um, like sometimes it was going to happen, but it wasn't going to happen, or you had to, repeat things and
yeah.
realign things. Like obviously those were more like the, I guess maybe problems is the wrong word to use, but those were the things that were on your mind at the time, trying to get into the industry. Like, how do I improve? Obviously now you're a pro. What were the things that were on your mind then? Like, was it similar things, or did that completely shift and you had new problems to face or new kind of things to worry about and conquer?
Yeah, so like like as you get jobs and stuff, and you start like working on projects and stuff, I think it goes from like you had that mindset of trying to get into the industry, and like that was the goal, right?
Mm,
So like once you get it, like the goalposts sort of just like disappear, and
yeah.
if you didn't move them preemptively, like okay, I got this job. Okay, now I'm gonna try to, like let's say if you were working in video games or something, like okay, I work at this indie company now. Now my goal is to get to like Bungie, or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
id, or insert big game company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
have stepping stones and stuff. For me, it sort of just like, okay, I got a job working in film, and I was just like, okay, what now? Like I
Mhm.
didn't, think of like what was the next step.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so there was like a period there where I was like sort of like contracts would end. I was sort of like job hopping,
Hmm.
and like going from like 3 month contract to 3 month contract of like, I was racking up all these credits, and working on these like Marvel projects
Hmm.
and like Game of Thrones, all these big things. But I sort of felt lost at the same
Mm.
time, like both of like where I was going like with my own art, and then also career wise. So like over time, I sort of like reestablished myself and sort of grounded, uh, like where I wanted to
Yeah.
go and like what my next goals were pretty much. But it
Mm.
took a bit. So like if like for people that are like about to get in or like they're like getting big jobs and stuff now, I'd probably
Yeah.
be like
Yeah.
be aware of that, because you can end up wasting a bit of time, which is what I think I did.
Mm.
Um,
Like,
where you could have been uh, another year ahead of yourself or something.
what was making you feel um like lost? Like what why did you feel that way, and what did you think was or feel was missing?
Yeah, like so what I was doing, I was working on a bunch of like post production, sort of like VFX work,
Huh?
concept stuff, which is fun. Like like I do get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But like my end goal, at least when I was studying, was to like do like pre-production work, right?
Mm.
So like I sort of like lost to like figure out like how do I okay, I'm working on film, but now how do I get to the pre-production side of this
Okay.
stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that like is sort of like a huge gray area for people, I think,
Mm.
because like at least in the States, like a lot of it is you have to be in a union,
Yeah.
to the Art Directors Guild, to even be able to work on that stuff
Right. Okay.
semi long term,
Yeah.
let alone for years. So like figuring out how to like do that
Uh
took a
huh.
bit of time.
Yeah.
And I'm still not in there, so like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's still something I'm pursuing. But at least now I know, like, oh, okay, I just have to figure out a way of getting in there, and
Yeah.
then I'll be able to at least have the opportunity. Like,
Mm.
even if I don't get the job offers, like at least I have the ability to,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then from there, then I'd start pursuing the actual like, um, getting like proper like pre-production film
Mm.
work and all that stuff. But I think without knowing that is like without knowing like like the process of
Mm.
how to get into the union and all this other stuff, it sort of left me in like a gray area of
Like,
like
what was that like? Like, how did you get the knowledge of how to get into the union? Are you in the union now?
no, so I'm still trying to get in, but
Yeah.
but it was
Isn't
like
it
sort
like
of like
someone's got to recommend you or something like that?
yeah,
Or okay.
exactly. So it's or you can work on a project for a few months and get grandfathered in.
Ah. Okay. Okay.
So like I sort of just learned about it over the course of working at places and
Yeah.
talking to people. Like
Mm.
I worked with a few people that were in the union,
Yeah.
and still are, and like just being like brushing shoulders with those
Yeah. Yeah.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
talking to them in the office and all this other stuff. You kind of like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Well,
Um,
I guess it's like season two for you because season one was like getting into the industry and you conquered that. And now the new challenge is this one. But I guess
yeah,
with
exactly.
all the things you learned before about, I guess it's like, I don't know if you'd agree, but it's more like you know how to anticipate the kind of obstacles now and you have the thought process of how to overcome them. And obviously the element of like patience, which you mentioned before as well, plays a big part as well.
For sure.
Well, like, so then obviously you mentioned that how you've kind of found yourself or like regrounded yourself. I'd love if you could elaborate more on that.
Yeah, so like I sort of just like started to take things a bit slower,
Hmm.
and focus on just I guess like having fun again,
Mm.
and just like doing art for the sake of art
Yeah,
versus like trying to get into the industry and achieve this big goal sort of thing.
yeah, yeah,
And like like finding a balance, I think is super important because
for sure.
there were times where I did burn myself out pretty hard.
Mm.
And like there's times where I hated concept art, which I thought could never happen.
Yeah,
Right? um, I was like, oh, you can just keep doing this, and
yeah, yeah,
like after years of just like, and just like I guess being like very hard on myself at times, and
Yeah.
being, like you kind of just like, occasionally you're very demeaning to yourself, or
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, you're not good enough, get better, like that sort of
Mm-hmm.
like internal
Yeah.
dialogue that sometimes have, like sort of like pulling back on some of that stuff,
Yeah.
and just sort of being like, like the more you work on it, the better you'll get,
Yeah.
and just leaving it at that, and just, kind of letting it be a more um, organic progression, I guess. And at this point, I'm sort of just like, like I have goals, but at the same time, I'm just sort of like, wherever the industry and whoever is looking at my stuff takes me, and
Mm.
whatever job offers I get, I'll just kind of just go with it. Because at the end of the day, it's like I'm doing art for a living, and
Yes.
that was the initial goal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did that, and I'm now having fun again with it.
Mm.
So I sort of like got my goals, so now I'm just sort of like whatever else comes is just like a cherry on top,
Sick. Sick. Um, like with regarding burnout, because I've seen like different
Mm.
people obviously affects people in different ways, or it's more or rather it's like they deal with things in different ways, especially with burnout. Like how does burnout affect you? Like what does it look like for you?
Um, well, for me, it's like just um, everything feels like super hard to do,
Mm-hmm.
and we're like it's just like it feels more like work than more like fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't it like when they say like when you uh, get your passion as a job, like it shouldn't feel like work. It should just feel
Yeah.
like you're doing your thing, right?
Yeah.
It got to the point where it wasn't that. It did feel like work. And the other time that I felt that was when I was learning guitar.
Mm.
And there's times where like you'd be practicing scales and all this other stuff, and it
Yeah.
just felt like work. It didn't
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
were making anything valuable, or
Yes.
progressing. So like I kind of had that as like oh, okay, that's like um that's a thing that happens, when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just pour all your time into one task. So like I kind of had that as like like something that's relative to art to
Mm-hmm.
like look back on.
Mm.
um so I sort of used that as like, okay, so I just have to get to the point where I'm not like slaving over this and looking at it as like a task that's grueling, more of like a
Yeah.
task that's fun. um
Yes.
so getting back to that took a bit of time. um and there's points of where I was just like, okay, I'm done work, I go home, I just play like PUBG, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like any of these games like CS:GO or whatever, and just kind of just like shut off,
Mm.
and go from there. And sometimes you do need that. Sometimes you do need time to recharge. And I think having a balance of like having your nose to the grindstone, and then
Yes.
also like taking a step back, and enjoying life, and watching movies, or hanging out with your significant other
Mm-hmm.
or your friends and all this other stuff. And like having that balance is super important now. And when you're studying it, it feels impossible.
Yeah.
So um you know s- I, I I think being aware of that, whether if you do want to just like no life it and just get into the industry as fast as possible,
Mm-hmm.
make sure when you do get in to like, I guess, recenter yourself, and reevaluate what your life currently looks like.
Mm.
Because like if you just keep going at that same pace, eventually you will, um I think, hit a wall of some
Yeah.
kind,
I
or
think
reach like a
that's
plateau.
well said and very accurate. Um, and I think you nailed it as well. Where it's like with art, you mentioned that like a lot of people think if it's your passion, it should be great all the time, but it is still work, and work is work, and there's always like things that
Hmm.
are not exactly what you want to do. Um, and I think also you mentioned that you can't answer my next question, which was going to be when you do have those burnouts or those like moments where it's like, okay, this is getting a bit crazy now. how do you kind of decompress and how do you get away from that? Obviously, you mentioned with the gaming and all that kind of stuff as well. Is there anything that's like kind of your go-to, or is it more a case of, okay, what do I feel like doing that's not art, and then you kind of do that?
Yeah, so like I guess like there'd be like the bigger like sort of like rest periods of like, okay, I'm not gonna work on personal work for X amount of time and just
Hmm.
sort of like, maybe just do sketches in my sketchbook that people will
Hmm.
like no one will ever see, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's sort of just for yourself, which I think is really good to do.
for sure. Yeah.
Because then you don't have the pressure of like, oh, like blah 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 will see this, and then like how people think that like everyone judges you based off of your worst piece in your portfolio.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
you want
yeah,
to
yeah.
keep, it's better to have like the top 5 versus 20, like all right pieces, or like
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like doing bad art, I think, is important sometimes to like decompress in a way,
Mm.
just so that you can like just let your ideas out, but also like not be worried about like the whole like fidelity aspect and like details, and
Mm.
like, is this compositionally, you know amazing, and like all this other stuff, like just like draw as if you were a kid again, like
Yes.
that sort of thing.
Yes.
Which is something that I think is, super important, because there are times where you don't want to think about like making a beautiful image, right?
Mm.
uh,
Yeah.
and then I guess oh yeah, sorry.
Oh no, no, carry on, no, carry on.
And then like I guess on like the day-to-day side of things, it was rock climbing, just something
Wow.
physical to like go out and just relax
Hmm.
and not focus on art. But since the whole lockdown pandemic situation, like all the climbing gyms are closed, and
Oh man.
you can't really go on climbing trips because like for climbing you need like either someone to like spot you if you're doing
Yes.
bouldering, so if you fall, they can push you into the pads,
Right. Right.
or
Right.
like somebody to belay you with the rope, and if you fall they can like stop the rope from going.
Basically, save your lives, make sure you don't die.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So I can't really do any of those right now. So, like I'm sort of like replacing that with like calisthenics and like gymnastic stuff in
Cool.
my apartment. Um,
Like, what are you doing for
so
that? Is it like just stuff that you kind of already know, or is it like stuff online that you're checking out?
yeah, so like for that, like I've been like for like the calisthenic stuff, you mean? Like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like that, I bought like a pair of gymnastics rings and stuff, and before that, I had like parallel bars and stuff. So I
Sick.
sort of like going into like learning planches and
Hmm.
front levers and like all these like like street workout moves and all this other stuff.
Sick.
And like I don't know, goal right now is like get an iron cross, which is probably gonna take years. Like I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like they do this at the Olympics all the time, but it's like they have both their arms like out like if they were a cross pretty much, and
Yes.
they're like
Yes. Yes.
like
Yes.
like hanging there, on the rings, and it's a
Wow.
crazy amount of strength and stuff. But
Uh,
like having goals there on the physical side too is good. Just something to
I think
keep
that
yourself going.
what goes hand in hand a lot, and speaking with not just like other artists on the podcast and just people in general, especially on the creative side, it's like creativity, especially art and physical activity where possible. They go hand in hand. They're a perfect pair. Because they really like help one another. More so, maybe the physical stuff helps the art stuff more than the other way around.
Uh,
Like, have you always been into kind of like physical activity?
so there was a time where like I wasn't, like
Hmm.
I was pretty much into, like just sitting down all day playing games, then
Mm-hmm.
spending all night working on art. Um, and there was this like a certain point where that isn't doable anymore, like
Mm.
for health reasons, right? And like I got hit super hard when I was younger with like health, complications.
Right.
So I that like having that physical side, like I've been doing that probably since I was like 14,
Mm.
like sort of like making it like a habit.
That's cool. That's cool.
And like like I started off with like going to like the gym in high school, and like working out with friends there.
Yeah.
And my dad like got a punching bag in our
Sick.
basement, and like sort of just like uh, organically
Mm.
fed into itself as far as on the physical side. I got introduced to climbing, and then that took off, and now that's like you know something that is competing for my art time. Like at least before the whole
Nice.
back
Yeah.
in 2019 during the good old
Yeah.
days, I guess. You know, but like just having those physical outlets, I think,
I think it's interesting
it's
you
like
say that it competes with your time because, like, I think a lot of people listening and artists like myself and yourself, it's like art is like I guess our pick of what we want to do the most. But there are other things that can still be maybe either equally as awesome or just as awesome
yeah,
that you might want to invest into as well. Like, what is it about that makes you want to do that? I guess more, or makes you want to do that more as well as art.
yeah. So like I guess for like art, it was like the thing that like got me excited was seeing like the progress and like
Mm,
seeing the like even if it took months, you'd get better at it, right? And then
yes.
you'd see the fruits of your labor pretty
Mm,
much, right? Whether that be like you made an awesome piece and then it got a ton of attention
yeah.
on ArtStation, then you got like it's sort of like a
Yeah. Yeah.
cascading
Yeah.
effect there.
Yeah.
Or you learned a new software and you made something with it that actually looks good and isn't just like you messing around with the default cube or like a like the
Mm.
sphere in ZBrush or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And for climbing, like for me, it was like a similar sort of thing where it was like you start off and you suck, right? Like you
Yeah.
have no idea what you're doing. And just seeing that build up and like you know eventually climbing with like people that climb in competitions and like hanging out with them at certain
Yes.
points, like you know talking to like really big professional climbers and being
Yeah.
able to like climb the same problems they climb and
Mm-hmm.
like or at least attempt them and get like halfway up. I was just like, oh shit, like
Wow.
seeing stuff like that is a big I guess parallel that art has as well, and that's why it's
Yes.
competing with my time. um because you see yourself get better and better and you just want to
Right.
keep going sort of thing.
So it's like the lure of that, like that progression and wanting to conquer something, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you a
I'm
competitive
like,
person generally? Is it more like a competitive thing or more like something within yourself that you want to like own this, you want to like get good at this? Because I
it's
guess
more of
both are
like
kind of
a
different, right?
yeah. So like, I wouldn't say I'm as competitive as say like when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was younger, I wasn't like super competitive either.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of like, um, I sort of had to fake that competitive nature when I
Okay.
was like trying to break in, and I sort of, like I talked about that a bit ago. As far
Yeah.
as like the brainwashing yourself and reading the
Yes.
self-help books and all that.
Yes.
Um, but like I guess as like naturally I'm more of just like like I care more about that feeling of like just growth, I guess.
Nice. Yeah.
Um, and that's what does it for me.
Sick.
Um,
And
so
like, what
yeah.
what would you say is next in terms of like things? Like, are there other things simmering in the background that you want to grow upon as well, and kind of like say get better at also, or is it like because I guess that you mentioned earlier that you kind of finding that balance, that harmony at the moment in life. Like,
Yeah.
is it going to be maybe these aspects, or are there other things that kind of are vying for your attention as well?
Yeah, so like I think, at least for the time being, like, these are the top two.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the third would be like, cultivating a relationship with my girlfriend
Mm-hmm.
who I've been with for like 2 3 years almost now.
Cool.
And then like I get, there's other things where like I've been writing,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Nice.
like, short stories and stuff like that on my like spare time,
Yeah.
or yeah, like writing down ideas for, like games or films, and I'll revisit down the road. So like I think I'll eventually start um branching out a bit more and probably being
Sick.
like, okay, for an hour I'll do this, the
Yeah.
next hour
Yeah.
I'll do that, and then sort of restructure my
Mm.
schedule instead of just being solely based around what I'm doing now, sort of thing.
Like with scheduling. How are you with that? Are you someone who's very rigid with scheduling? Do you plan quickly, or is it more like I'll just go with whatever tasks like most urgent and then go that way? Like, what's your process regarding that?
Yeah, so um, when I was I guess there's two aspects of that. For, like currently, it's more of like organic process of like,
Uh-huh.
okay, like what are the most important things I need to do? I'll get those done first. Occasionally, I'll set timers for myself, right, just to
Hmm.
uh, sort of light a fire under my ass, artificially of being like, okay, I've only got 2 hours, even though
Yeah.
I really have like 5 hours to get it done.
Yes.
Like I'll just be like, okay, I want to get it out of the way so I can do other stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So like that now is probably the way that I do it the most. There are times where you have days where you're just like you can't follow that, and
Hmm.
it's sort of just like a slower day, which I think is fine. Like you do need days like that.
Hmm.
Otherwise I think you'll hit a wall eventually. But back in the day, like when I was studying, it was more of just like like I'd set timers for everything. I'd just
Wow.
be like, okay, I have to, do this. I'd like literally like I'd set a timer for lunch. Like it was just like it was bad.
Wow.
I mean, it was good as
Yeah.
far as
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
dedication and stuff, but looking back, like as like a health mindset and like
Yes.
being like I guess like sane and not going crazy over things, it was pretty bad. So I think finding a balance between that, which like right now, I think I'm a bit more in that balanced
Yeah.
area than where it was in previous years.
That's
And
interesting because, like, I think you're the first person I've spoken to who's done it in reverse. Normally, it's like the other way around, like kind of having like the organization be like I mentioned organic, and then going to being more like strict and managing things. So I think that's really cool insight. I'm sorry, you continue.
yeah,
I just
like
interrupted you there.
oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
like no, it's cool. But like um, eventually, I think I will sort of just drift back into the
Mm,
more structured thing, but like I think it's just something that you'll figure out what your groove should be.
sure. Yeah.
You know, what works for you, because some people, they do thrive on, like having everything, already structured, set
Mm,
up, and like, you have, like you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna do client work from, you know, 9 a.m.
yeah.
to
Yeah.
5 or whatever, right? And then from 5 to 10, I'll do personal work, and I'll be working on, this thing in 3D code, this thing in Zbrush,
Mm,
like you have everything laid out, and then, and I've tried that, and I've done that, and it's worked. But, like I think after a while, you do lose some of that, like, I guess, like, like the artistic sort of
yeah.
just like fluidity of just like, letting things just like come out, right?
Hmm.
So, um, like I think for like design, like having that really structured mindset is amazing,
Yeah.
because you can do studies, you can do all this other stuff and learn XYZ. But right now, personally, I'm just trying to grow on that artistic side, and
Yes.
then maybe in a year I'll go back to the design stuff, right? Or
Mm,
like certain months I'll be like, okay, I want to focus more on like a more structured
hmm.
way of doing things, and like, okay, I want to like study how Vitaly makes the Vitaly Bulgarov, like how he
Yes.
designs his
Yes.
stuff, right? Or
Yes.
figure that out, or um you know study architecture for a month
Hmm.
or two. And there's times where that is needed, but I think also just having that period of just like just being organic in how you create stuff, and um not like over pressuring yourself, I guess.
That's something I can relate to as well. And I agree with you totally. It's like, as a professional, you want to kind of have all the tools, or you're happy to like take on certain methods that will make you a better professional, especially when it comes to like because obviously we make money from this, so you want to make sure everything's fine, everything's
Yeah,
perfect.
exactly.
But then obviously mentioned from an artistic side, the beautiful thing about being an artist is you can be one employed and unemployed, in the sense that like you don't need to have a job to be able to do it.
Mhm.
Obviously when we're drawing as kids, it's like we are obviously we can't work, although that's slave labor. So we just do it, we just do it for fun,
Yeah.
and just for enjoyment and wanting to explore things. And I think you really nailed it on the head when you mentioned that like if you want to just make things what you feel like making, what kind of, like you mentioned obviously 3D code and ZBrush and all that kind of stuff. It's like I guess playing computer games. You never force yourself to play a game. You play what you want to play, and then you enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
You never play what you don't want to play. And I think like with art, I've definitely gone through it where I'm specifically on like say one particular either discipline or software, and then I switch to another one. And then when I'm kind of forced to do something in something that I don't want to do, it does feel like a bit of a chore.
Mm.
And I guess like if you can find that balance, I guess that's the holy grail. Where if you can find the balance where you can switch it when you need to, so you can go into like Terminator Robocop mode when you need to, and then you can go into like some kind of awesome creative flow after that as well. Um, let's touch upon software a little bit. So you mentioned
Yeah.
3D Coat and ZBrush. Like what nowadays? Obviously, there's so many softwares, and they're all super
Yeah.
powerful. Like what are your go-to softwares for your workflow right now?
I guess so. Right now, I guess Blender, like
Yeah.
everyone else, I guess in the industry right now, is my number one. Just because it is such a like it's a Swiss Army knife
No,
of
for sure.
software.
Yeah.
Because you can do like quick sculpting in there, or you
Mm-hmm.
can do like polygonal modeling, all this other stuff. And now there's plugins to like have a bit more of like a 3D coat like workflow,
Yes.
where you're sort of just like using marquees and
Mm-hmm.
lasso tools to create your shapes and all that. So I think that's number one, just
Mm-hmm.
based off of versatility. And then 3D coat for like like architecture.
Mm.
That's a bit more complex, just for the fact that you can do like the stencils in there.
Yes.
Um, and you can quickly just like mock up like, okay, I need like hieroglyphs on like a certain wall for like a sci-fi civilization, like
Yeah. Yeah.
something based. You can just like draw that up in Photoshop, black and white, throw
Mm-hmm.
it in there, and then boom, you've got your design. You can put it on everything. It's amazing.
Yes.
uh, and I guess and then like I mentioned ZBrush, and that's something I'm learning now, just
Mm-hmm.
because I want to have a more reliable character workflow for like having reusable characters, whether that be for client work or personal work,
Yeah.
like personal projects and stuff. Because like 3D code's good for that stuff, but there is like a certain point where just based off of how it works, if you want like a super detailed model, it is gonna have a bunch of like polygons and stuff.
Yes.
And
Yes.
even if you do like remesh it and like bake the details into a
Mm-hmm.
low res one, it still kind of comes out a bit mushy looking for
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
taste, at
Yeah.
least. um so like I've been looking at like Raf Grossetti stuff, and I was just like, oh shit, if I
Classic.
could
Yeah.
somehow get to that, right? And
Yes.
then mix that with my environment stuff, and like how I know how to like build that and like vehicles
Mm-hmm.
and all the other stuff, it'd be like, oh, okay, then I'd be like, I guess complete as far as like as far as like skill set and
Yeah.
workflow
For
wise.
sure.
um so like I've learned Marvelous Designer. So that was step one, and
Yeah.
now step two is like learn ZBrush, so I can like design out the actual character creature I'm designing's
Yeah.
features and all that stuff. um and then like I guess everything after that will just be bonus. Like I bought Moi, and I learned
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But like Blender's sort of faster
Yeah.
for
For sure.
certain things. So I was sort of just like left that. I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool, like it's there if I need it, I know how to
Yeah.
use it.
Yeah.
um but it's not part of my like everyday
Sure.
sort of thing. um and then Photoshop, obviously,
Of course. Yeah.
everyone. um eventually, maybe like if the free stuff gets better, I'll switch away from Photoshop and make my workflow like all freeware or something.
It's heading that way by the looks of it.
Yeah, no, I hope it keeps going. Like if Blender gets like VR and all this other stuff, and their sculpting gets as good as ZBrush, I'll gladly just switch to like Blender and like,
It's
you know.
crazy how, I guess, I mean, if you ask the Blender guys, I might say this is not quick, but because they've been working on it for years. But it's
Mhm.
crazy how quickly that's become like almost, at least in the concept art world, like
Oh, it's a standard now.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and you're absolutely right. I think it is like like people like Jammer and a lot of other guys have shown like the level of work that you can do on it, and the fact that they're doing it on the high end projects just speaks for itself. But the fact that you can, like, at least as a concept artist, literally kick out everything you can't need, maybe not to the perfect level, but at least to a level, just
Mhm.
shows that it is worth having, even in a financial sense, because it's free, and the plugins are nowhere near as much. I guess if you've got all the plugins that you need, potentially it'll still be less than, like, say, a
Yeah,
license
it would
of
be
another
way less
software.
than like, yeah, like say like Cinema 4D, for example,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
which I still think is, as far as like ease of use, is still a slightly better software.
Hmm.
Um, but like Blender is not that far away from it,
Hmm.
as far as like workflow and all this other stuff. So like C4D is 1,000 and like
Mm.
$200 or something like that. I think for like a like their pro license, like the best version of
Yes,
C4D, or
yes.
and then like if you bought all the plugins like like hard ops and box cutter and
Yeah,
uh, speed flow and all these other like like tree plugins and stuff, and like you're maybe gonna hit like $300 or something.
exactly. I mean, yeah, like the average, I think, like what, $30. Let's say be generous. Let's say $40 a pop.
Yeah,
Um,
probably. There's some that are like 20, yeah, but it's usually like around 30, 40.
that's 1 month of Adobe Creative Suite. So if you look
Yeah,
at
no,
it that way,
exactly. So
so
it's
that,
um
and I think for
it's
guys
amazing.
learning as well, it's like it's an obvious choice because it's free. So people will jump on that first, because I know people used to like. I'm sure they still do like pirate software. It's not as easy as it used to be, and it's probably like not as reliable in terms of like stability wise. So having something like Blender to be there, to be available, and to be able to do the things you can do, is just great. And obviously, the fact that pros are using it just helps as well. And obviously, like things like C4D and all the other ones have a place because they are geared towards the the industry and what the industry needs and requires and what have you. But yeah, Blender's definitely come a long way. And you mentioned VR. Like, do you mess with VR much?
Yeah, so like I've messed with it at like friends' places and stuff,
Right, right,
and
right.
certain jobs, like they'd have like stuff there that I could use.
Uh huh. How have you
And
found it?
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Though like after 30 minutes, like you do, or at least I do, get a bit sick off
Yeah.
of it. Um, just as far as like using like Gravity Sketch and
Mm-hmm.
like Medium and all these other like sculpting softwares, because you are like
Mm.
jumping around a ton. Like my mind body connections, like what's going on?
It is
um,
weird initially.
I imagine
Yeah.
you get used to it after a while. Like like
Do
if you're
you
like
do
using
you wear
much.
glasses at all?
No, no. So
So I've got
I
dodgy
like
eyesight a little bit. So like I got
okay.
astigmatism, so my eyes are not equal. So that's what's messed me up a little bit. Like if I wear contact lenses, which is more comfortable wearing them on a VR
Mm,
headset, because both of my eyes are not equal in terms of what they want to see, that messes me
uh-huh.
up a little bit. If I wear glasses, it's better, but then obviously you got it's just adds
But then
more
you got the
chunk.
glasses on.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
it gets all weird. But like in terms of how it works, like it's very intuitive because you're not like in that holding a pencil or stylus position. It is just like moving your arms around. It feels way more natural. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, no, so like VR is like it's super intuitive and stuff. Though it I think right now it is still in its early stages and stuff.
Yeah.
So like if I were to get a VR headset, since I don't have one
Mhm.
currently, and like all the times I've used this like through friends or companies and stuff. It'd probably be like a Valve Index or something like that,
Mhm.
just because of the like the build quality and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Downside is though like um, like none of the major like sculpting softwares are natively on that.
Yeah.
Like they're all part of like the Oculus ecosystem
Yep.
currently,
Mhm.
except for like the Medium now got bought by Adobe, so
Oh yeah,
I
that's
think
correct.
that's
Yeah.
out of there. But for the most part, they're all still part of like Oculus and all that stuff. So you'd
Mm.
have to like, I think, get to use like a it's like this like you're sort of just like it's like emulating it sort
Mm.
of on like through like an emulator. So you're like using like the Oculus ecosystem but on your
Okay.
index, and I've heard it's good, but it also sounds super janky to me. So um I'm waiting for that stuff to kind of get figured out. um for what I do, I think Blender and like 3D code and all that stuff is good enough
Oh, for
currently.
sure. Yeah. I mean,
um
if they can like, I'm sure they will. I guess it depends if it's worth the investment of it, because as cool as artists are, we're like a small piece of revenue for them compared to like say the mass population
yeah,
and
no, compared
all.
like to the
Yeah,
games and all this other
exactly.
stuff.
But if they can make like, I'm sure they will, because technology always improves when you have the energy towards it. But if they can make it like super accessible to wear and not like intrusive,
Like
where
a
you like,
big bulky sort of
yeah,
thing with all these wires and all that.
exactly,
Yeah.
things to connect, things to calibrate, and all that kind of stuff. Like if they can make it so, because with the controls and everything, that as you'd agree, that just works because you can create straight away, just
Yeah.
get going, and none of this messing around. You just have your canvas or your 3D space and just start creating away. But if they can replicate that on the hardware side, they're onto a winner. And obviously, you mentioned as well that I think Blender does have some VR kind of integration, or is looking to.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Yeah.
I think there's like a basic version of it right now.
Hmm.
But like their plan is to like implement that more and more, I'm pretty sure.
And are there any other softwares, packages, or disciplines on your horizon that you'd love to either add to your arsenal or are really kind of whetting your appetite right now?
Um, hmm,
Because there's
it's
two
a good
ways, right?
one.
There's one that's kind of like, oh, that would be cool to have. I wonder what that would do. And there's one that is like, okay, that would really improve what I do right now, or,
Yeah,
or
no,
make
like
things easier.
currently, I think like, hmm, like I guess like I said that I was learning Zbrush, so that's like my current one. But as
Hmm.
far as like stuff beyond that, um, not really. Like
Hmm.
maybe like like learn how to better like texture stuff. Like I know
Right.
Substance Painter and stuff, but
Oh, that's
maybe
a
like
cool
go
software.
more in
Yeah.
depth with that. Um,
Yeah.
so like maybe like push that more on the 3D side of
Mm.
things. But at the same time, I'm also trying to um, just like develop my like 2D artistic understanding as well.
Yes.
Like like color theory and all that other stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I'm probably gonna go back to the more 2D side of things
Hmm.
before I um, delve more into the 3D and making it like super crazy high fidelity and stuff.
Yeah. That's something that I've kind of been dwelling on a lot now. Because I've spent the last few years really like experimenting with all these different softwares and workflows and a lot of 3D and all this kind of stuff. And then it's kind of like taking stock of things that you mentioned,
Mhm.
the 2D side of things, the fundamental side of things, the theory side of things. Um, that's kind of like where it is really always at, because that's like the DNA of image making. So that's
Yeah.
something that probably I want to get back onto as well. Because yeah, once you I guess master that or conquer that, you're onto a winner always. You could even use the most basic of
No, that's the
tool and you
thing.
can make
Or
something
like the
awesome.
weirdest one. Yeah, exactly. Like you could use like some weird like
Like
voxel displacement thing or something.
Blender from
Like
10 years ago.
or yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly. Like like Blender 1.0, right?
yeah,
You could probably end up making something interesting at least.
And like, do
And
you mentioned obviously you sketch as well, because you have your sketchbook with you. Do you carry that with you most places, or is that just something like you just do once in a while?
yeah, no, so I've got like a small like moleskin, like like it's like
Nice. Yeah.
the palm of your hand sort of size.
Yeah.
And like I've got like a few of those that I like carry around, and I'll
Sweet.
like have a pen or a pencil or something. But if I'm doing stuff like out there, it's more of just like writing down ideas
Mm-hmm.
more than actually sketching stuff. Like, because for me, like just like having some keywords to like put myself back into that same like headspace I was when I came up with that idea
Yes.
is more valuable than like doing like a super shitty quick sketch.
Yeah. True. I agree with that. Yeah.
So and then it also lets you like you get into that mindset, but then you can also like explore
Mm.
of like, oh, okay, that was a cool idea, but what if I did XYZ with it, right? Um, so that's how I've been like going about that sort of stuff. And then when I get home, I do like the, like ink sketches or
Mm.
quick pencil stuff to explore the ideas, and then I take it in the 3D or straight into Photoshop or whatever, and like go from there.
You've kind of touched on this a bit earlier, but like when it comes to making stuff and creating
Mm.
things, you just kind of mentioned it just now. Like, are you in it more for like the exploration side of things, like exploring an idea or like say a philosophy or all these kind of things that you have going in your head when you create, or is it more like say on the technical side where you want to achieve like great image making with the perfect technique and like are you predisposed to any particular one, or is it, I guess, just both?
Yeah, it's pretty much both. Like it goes
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. Like there's
Mm.
times where I'm just like, okay, I want to make like like a image that's as good as like The Last of Us 2
Yes.
art,
Yeah.
or like the Mandalorian stuff,
Yeah.
or insert, cool art drop that just
Yeah.
happened, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then there's times where I'm just like, okay, I want to be like, like have that like Van Gogh mindset of just like throwing stuff at a canvas and seeing what colors work together,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of just exploring, and but also like making a concept out of it at the same time, and like
Mm.
designing as I go sort of thing. So there's times where it's like a back and forth.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of art and just creativity in general is the fact that you can like flip between both, or even that's just only two things we mentioned about art. There's obviously many other facets to it as well. And I think it's really cool that like sometimes it happens all at once, in Dr. Manhattan kind of way, and then other times it's like it's very
Mm.
rigid and you kind of do one thing at a time and another thing at a time. Um, so your short stories, where did like what was the genesis of that? Like, have you always been into writing, or is that something that you've taken up recently?
Yeah, so like I used to do like this is something that they had us do back in like seventh grade. They'd like
Mm,
we'd have like a little thing. We'd do like little quick short stories and stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then like after that I abandoned it pretty much. But I still
Mm-hmm.
had that like off in like the attic sort of thing,
Yeah, yeah.
with my parents' place. Um and yeah, like I went back there and found it and went through that. I was like, okay, some of this stuff's cool.
Mm.
And then also like after that I sort of also just like left that there. I was like, okay, it's cool, but whatever, right? Um and then probably like 2 years later, I was talking to my friend Eflem,
Mm.
um and he was going on about how he was writing stuff, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good, because then it allows you to you know make a personal IP, but
Yes.
also have all this, I guess, backstory and lore and stuff that you
Yeah,
can kind
yeah.
of pull on,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just making it off the like top of your head as you're going.
Yes.
Um, so like that's what I'm doing now, and I've got like a project called Decuria, which I'm working on,
Yeah, I've
which
seen
is
that on your art
it's just
station.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
like it's like a personal IP that's like um it's more of like a world building project than
Uh-huh.
anything, but like with those smaller stories embedded in it, sort of like Final Fantasy, like
Okay.
how like you've got this massive world, but each time it's like a new story, new
Yes.
characters, that sort of thing. Um
And
so
when did you
just
start
going
that?
at it like that. That was probably 2015, so like
Cool.
2016. It was originally just gonna be like a quick project with my
Yes,
friend Thomas.
as always.
Uh, and then
Yeah.
like like he went off and did his own thing, and I was like, okay, I'll just continue with this, I guess,
Yeah.
because it sounded cool, and what we did for it initially was fun. And I was like, oh, I'll just, and that sort of just evolved into this, and I was like, okay, I'll start writing for it too, and then,
Cool.
then that it's just started, like layering on top of each other, sort of thing.
And do you have like a hope of how it would turn out as an IP? Like, would it be a graphic novel or just a bunch of artwork or maybe something else?
Yeah, I'd probably like start off with like an art book or
Huh?
something, and then eventually I'd want it to, be turned into something, like whether that be like it'd probably either be like a game or a TV series, just
Sick.
based off of like the formats.
Yeah.
Like there's room for, I guess, grand
Mm.
storytelling. Well, movies, you're kind of like stuck with that, like, what, 3 hour max,
Yes.
uh, a time frame of like, anything beyond that would be
Yeah.
impossible for people to sit down through.
Yes.
Um, so maybe like, I don't know, like seeing what Simon Stallonhog did with
Oh wow. Yeah.
Tales from the Loop, was super inspiring.
That's really cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so stuff like that, like seeing that, like, oh, it's possible, and
Mm.
or who's the guy that did Iron Harvest?
I'm not
He
familiar with
does
that.
like does well, there's this guy. It's like I forget his name, but he made a bunch of paintings. They're all over ArtStation. It's like yeah, like World War I mech sort of thing,
Right. Right.
like
Right.
in like Russia back then, and
Mm-hmm.
like like Eastern Europe sort of stuff. But he got it turned into like a RTS strategy game sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And like seeing that is super cool. Or there's a bunch of people now that are getting their projects picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like seeing that stuff like is like a driving force, and
Yeah. I
also the
think
fact that the entertainment industry is kind of blowing up right now, I think.
yes. I mean, they mentioned like I guess the last decade or so was the golden era of like TV. Obviously, you had things like Breaking
Hmm.
Bad and all these kind of shows that came along. Um, and maybe this is like the beginning of that golden era of like your content creators are not just the ones in that Hollywood slash entertainment kind of sphere. It's like it
Hmm.
is the artists they hire that are now making their own kind of thing, and maybe there's less layers, which I think should or would lead to better, more potent art. Maybe. Like how do you think the industry's going in that regard? Like as obviously concept artists,
Hmm.
we're still working in the industry, trying to get further into the industry and really establish ourselves. Like, do you think it is still going to be just like games and films and that shows and stuff, or based on your insights and your experiences so far, how do you think the
Hmm.
industry will take shape going forward?
Yeah, so like I think like what we have right now will always be there, as far as like the whole games like that, and like film, TV sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Though I think like like with the internet and all this other stuff, that um there will be other avenues of like, oh, I just want to make my thing like
Yeah, yeah,
like a web series or something, or like just like a series of books.
yeah.
And I think that could also be successful, and it has been for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, I think like it'll be like a broader way of reaching audiences in
Mm.
general, and it will continue growing in that aspect. Though I think like just based off of the mediums, like like TVs, movies, films, like that sort of stuff will be like um, the probably the second top, and then games will probably be the first, just based off of
Yeah,
like how the mediums interact with people and stuff.
yes. And I guess with especially with the games, because as the main consumers of games now, like they're approaching maybe the guys that used to play it as their kids, but when games kind of first became really, really popular, they're now
Yeah.
approaching their 40s, maybe even 50s. So they're now the
Yeah.
main consumers. So obviously they would still want to play those kind of things. So I guess it makes sense that that would be the top thing. Whereas currently maybe it is like the guys who prefer like TVs and films traditionally and what have you.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. So like,
Uh,
and maybe I guess also in terms of like now, there's a lot of like with
mhm.
Disney kind of buying out 80% of the
Oh yeah,
industry.
the entertainment industry.
Yeah, right now. I mean, like the fact in terms of like IPs, they own Marvel, they own all the Fox stuff, Alien, Avatar, all that kind of stuff. They've got a lot basically. Star Wars, of course, forgot to mention that.
Oh
Um, and
man.
like there are other studios like Warner Brothers have got a good collection of IPs. Obviously, maybe it's debatable whether they do right for those IPs, but then same could be said about Disney as well. There
No.
are other IPs as well over around, but then I guess from my perspective, I think it's quite exciting. Perhaps that maybe we'd be start working for, I guess, fellow artists as opposed to the studios, as like in terms of um, another way, another avenue of work. Because I guess right now it is kind of like trying to get a gig that's linked to a studio or all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
and you're somehow working for one of the big companies,
Yeah,
like whether like well, pretty much it's like all Disney at this point,
yeah. I
as
mean,
far
I
as
think Netflix are pretty aggressive on that, and now even Apple, I think, as well. I guess Amazon. We can
yeah,
include those guys
Amazon
as
as
well.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, like let's say Ash Thorpe has his own studio in a few years or whatever, and now he hires artists. I mean, Neil Blomkamp is probably a great example of someone who's, I guess, one of us because he became from the industry and then started making his
Yeah,
own things, and then now he
yeah,
hires artists
exactly.
as
That
well.
kind of
So
blew up. Yeah.
because like maybe there's more of that gonna happen as well, and maybe we'll start finding that artists who are great at art now realizing that maybe they are also great or maybe even better at like spearheading these projects or storytelling and what have you as well. What was that like looking back, growing up? Is there an IP or a film or a book or what have you or a game that really is like say that was the thing that looking back now in hindsight was the thing that led you onto this path you're on today?
Yeah, I guess like the big IPs answering that like the back end of that would be like and like games and stuff would be like I guess Star Wars, like
Mm-hmm.
Empire Strikes Back for
Mm-hmm.
films. Uh that and then for like games probably like Half-Life 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um so like my dad, he's a big gamer or was when
Nice.
he was like in his like 30s and
Yeah.
40s. Now he's 50 now and he's kind of
Yeah.
like he'll play like he plays like The Last of Us Part 2 and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more of like few and far between.
Right.
But back in the day, like you'd have like Quake, Doom,
Sick.
Half-Life, Call of Duty, back when it was like World War II sort of
Yeah.
stuff, and, like Medal of Honor, all that
That's
stuff.
dope.
So like I kind of grew up with that, and
Uh-huh.
like I think I beat Half-Life when I was like 5 or something.
Wow.
So like stuff like that.
Shit.
Will always I guess have a like a spot as far
Yeah.
as like in my inspiration pool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially like the Half-Life stuff. Like I think that was like super inspiring
Mm-hmm.
because like that was probably one of the first games where they were showing the art and stuff
Mm.
online and like in game magazines and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. Um, so like I got to see that stuff and it was like, oh, okay, cool.
Mm.
This is like a thing like that is doable. Like before that, it was sort of just like I knew map painting was a thing,
Yeah.
just because of like Star Wars and like Ralph McQuarrie and
Mm-hmm.
all those guys. And like but like I was like, oh, that's like it. So like I sort of wanted to do that as a kid, but at the same time, I was like, but I also just want to like make the ideas right instead of just
Yes.
like just going at it and like making the like background paintings and like
Mm-hmm.
fooling the people, which is cool. And like you're like, oh, okay, my thing's in the movie and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, um, like the more creative side of things is what gets me going and has
Mm.
like kind of kept me interested in this.
And what's inspiring you currently?
Oh man, oh that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Tell me all, man.
That's yeah. I guess right now, I've been playing through like the Final Fantasy VII remake, so
Mm-hmm.
that's like a big one. been going through like the Witcher books.
Cool.
Finally, after like seeing everyone praise them and stuff. So like going through those are super awesome. Then I like also just like watching like the more like human stories of like say like Chernobyl, right? Like on
Yes.
HBO.
Yep.
Like seeing stuff like that and like how impactful like stuff like that can be.
Yep. Yep.
Um and not everything has to be like super over the top sci-fi or
Mm-hmm.
follow the hero's journey and
Yeah.
like all this I guess stuff that is considered cliche now but
Mm-hmm.
is sort of like a staple
Yes.
in storytelling. It's like seeing stuff like that or also like playing games like going back and like playing Journey and seeing stuff like
Oh,
that
Journey's a
or
great
like
game. Yeah.
yeah, like I went through Inside recently and there's a bunch of like indie games that are also like
Mm.
interesting in their storytelling um avenues, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like seeing that stuff and like seeing how I could translate whatever I'm working on into one of those things
Yeah.
pretty much, like whether that be like a side scroller game or something that is like as AAA as like Final Fantasy 7 or like
Yeah.
Last of Us or something. And like everything in between pretty much. Um but yeah, that's
Cool.
it's sort of like broad as
Nah,
far
nah.
as like
It's like
everything.
I think it is pretty cool because I guess when you're younger, it is kind of like narrow. Maybe because how accessible things are when you're young. It's like you only get, you know, certain things you can really access as a kid. But then when you're older, you get literally a pick of what you'd like, and I think it's cool that it is like a diverse range of things, because I guess even as artists, it's very important to have that like when we do research, it's always said, look as far and wide as you can rather than just at one particular thing, unless that's what the project requires.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
and although I wouldn't say like to anybody do it intentionally, but like organically, we've used that theme a lot throughout this episode. Even
Mm.
with the stuff that you consume, like books, whatever it is, um, organically just keep your mind open and look at all these other things, because first it's cool. You never know what's going to really surprise you and be awesome, and ultimately it feeds into your art overall anyway. So what does the future hold for you, and what would you like it to hold for you?
Oh man. I guess finish my IP first and then
Yes.
see where that goes. That's
Where
like a
is that
big
at right
one.
now? Like how you mentioned like
Yeah,
finish,
so
is that just like, is that close to
I've,
finishing or
it's probably like 2/3 of the way there. Like
cool?
I've got all the writing done.
Sick.
As far as like like exploration of the IP and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
now it's sort of just like making images that go with it.
Mhm.
Um, and there's like time like I've got probably like 20 images where I'm just like those aren't good enough. Like they're good, but they're not what I want for it.
Mm.
So like I've got those, but like those are things that if I deleted them, I'd be like, okay, it kind of sucks, but whatever. I can make something better now, and I'm
Mm.
just gonna. So I guess once I get like say like maybe like 60, 50 maybe like good quality
Mhm.
images, and say like right now I've got like 10 that
Yep.
I'm like some of them I posted, some of them I haven't.
Yep.
Um, but once I get like 50 of them, I'll probably like approach someone or some company to make an art book out of it.
Nice.
Like with like a like not entirety of an art book, more of like a pitch deck art book sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then maybe go around to like studios and be like, hey,
That's dope,
what
man.
do you guys think? Um, and figure out the whole like contract side of all that stuff
Mm.
too, because that'll be a whole thing I'll need to learn and all that. As far as like how to not get your IP stolen and yeah, like all this other stuff, which I have, a vague idea about, but like I
Yeah. Like,
think,
how do
like
you
picking the
find
brain
all
of
that
like
contractual, financial, administrative side of things? Like, does that come to you
like
naturally, or does it like, do you hate it, or is it an inconvenience?
so
What?
at least for like so like when it comes to like just concept art stuff, like it's it was sort of like I had no idea what I was doing starting
Mm.
out, and I think that's most people. And then like as you go, you kind of get a feel for it, and
Mhm.
you're like, okay, you know what contracts are dumb, and you know what's
Mm.
good, um, and like you take into consideration, will I be able to post this work ever? Like because some
Yes,
stuff
yes,
you'll never
yes.
be able to,
Yeah.
and some stuff you will. So things like that, and that also plays into like your rates and all that as
Mhm.
well. But I think when it comes to um, like pitching an IP and all this other stuff, I think that's a whole different ball game as
Mm.
far as like legally speaking, because there is like so many different ways of like, oh, you can get them like a rundown of your idea, and then if they change it like a certain amount, you know, then legally it might be fine, right? And then they
Yeah,
turn
yeah.
into, so like stuff like that, like I have no idea about pretty
Yes.
much. And like I've listened to like I think Ash had like a few of his like collective podcast things,
Uh-huh.
where yeah, he went over that, or like I think he had a lawyer on one time
Yeah.
where they, I think touched on that for a couple of minutes or something.
Mhm.
But it'd be cool to like pick someone's brain about it eventually, maybe. Because like whether it be like Ash or I'm not sure if Mache is gonna do that with Showtime. Maybe like
Yeah.
ask him about it like down the road, or there's a bunch of people that I know that are now like pitching IPs of their own.
Mm.
Who knows? Maybe I'll even like ask Simon
Yeah,
Steinheier or
man.
something. Who knows?
Slide in
Because
his
like
DMs and just get that information.
yeah, no, I'll hit him up on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dude.
But like
Yeah.
it's it'll be interesting. It'll be fun
Mm.
and interesting, I think, when I get there.
I think it'd be
Uh,
good to see, and I like there's something intriguing about the IP creation journey. I mean, like even the OGs that have done, like George Lucas, is like
mhm.
the most fascinating thing about Star Wars. Like I'm a big Star Wars fanboy myself as well, and
Yeah.
on one hand you look at it as someone who's just enjoyed the stories that have been told and how it looked and all the cool stuff that's in there. But then growing older, you like I'm a sucker for the behind the scenes stuff. Not so much like how they
Oh,
made
dude,
it,
me too.
but like the like what triggered this? Who are the driving forces behind this? The like one of the my favorite films, which is not a film, is the behind the scenes Lord of the Rings, like the making
Oh,
of all.
yes.
I don't know how many
Yes.
hours it is, but it's just like that reaffirmed my desire to want to work in the entertainment industry, just because of like you could see how much struggle they went through, all the problems, and that was like I guess glossed over and made presentable for an audience. So you can only imagine how it would have been on set seeing it live. And there's something about seeing that struggle and people still wanting to make it is awesome. And obviously, like with George Lucas, it was something like I guess the first Star Wars, the whole process to make it seemed like a big pain. He hated it. It wasn't exactly what he wanted it to be. Um, but nevertheless, he still pursued it and still pushed for it, even when it seemed like things went against him and all this have you went against the Hollywood system, all of these kind of things. And there's something inspiring like behind that,
Mhm.
and there's that appeal of like so he's done it, because technically I think like Star Wars is technically an indie film the way it was made.
Oh
um
yeah, for sure.
it
Like,
wasn't like
everything.
yeah,
It was like most of like he'd take out loans and stuff, and
exactly.
yeah, like they, most of the stuff they did for that film, they had to, pretty much make up as far as
Mm.
like how they were gonna achieve a lot of the shots and stuff, and
And then and like
how they were gonna fund it. Yeah.
exactly, and even the impact of that. I mean, it's with the industry that we're in right now, would it be even around if it wasn't for like say what Star Wars did for that industry? Because ILM didn't exist until that point. And
Mhm.
or would it even be in the same shape that it is now? So it's all speculation, but nevertheless, um, like the IP journey is an intriguing one because even though it's well documented that so many people have struggled to do it, when it does pull off, I guess like you mentioned before, it's about conquering that journey and those goals and seeing that you can do it. So all the best to you with that one.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Yeah, it'll be tricky, that's for sure.
Mm.
I don't know, like, just by watching, like, I've watched a bunch of stuff on like George Lucas and stuff,
Yeah.
and like, I think before Star Wars, he was gonna make Apocalypse Now, like,
Oh,
like
he was
that.
intended to. Okay.
Yeah, that Coppola film was supposed to
Yes.
be a George
Yes. Yes.
Lucas
Yes.
film originally,
Wow.
apparently, and they were gonna go to Vietnam or something
Yeah. Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
shoot it there, like during the war, and like, that would have been crazy all in itself. But
Yeah.
like, also Star Wars is crazy, right?
Of course.
So
Of course. A different kind of crazy, but maybe even
yeah, no,
crazier.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because you got like, it's like space wizard samurais, and like, it's all, I guess as far as like where the industry would have gone, I guess without Star Wars, who knows? It maybe might
Mm.
have taken a more you know, realistic approach to
True.
stuff, and
Yeah. Cool.
um,
Dude,
but
I
yeah,
guess we can end it there. We've
yeah,
not done 2
sounds good.
hours, even though electricity cuts tried to hamper that. We managed to get it done in the end. Thanks a lot for jumping on. Thanks a lot for your insights. It's great to hear your journey.
Yeah, no, thanks for
Any
having me.
final words for students, aspiring artists, fellow artists out there? Anything you'd like to say or add?
Just like keep going, I guess. Like, don't lose that drive. Don't lose that fun factor with what you're doing, and just keep at it, pretty much.
Sweet. Thanks a lot, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. That's a wrap. We're done.
Woo,
Let me make
we
sure.
did it.
Huge thanks to David. Please check out his work by following the links in the description below. And once you've done that, head on over to learnsquared.com and get the first lesson of each of our courses for free. Till next time.